Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to go into something a little bit personal. I'm going to talk about living with a learning disability. I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 7, so that was 20 years ago. Back then it wasn't really known very well at all. I think I was like one of the first people to be diagnosed in the school. Basically, when I was younger, my mum had a parents' evening and my teacher kept basically saying that I was lazy, not concentrating enough, things like that. And my teacher kind of stopped herself and turned around and went, she heard the exact same thing when she went to her sons. She had twin sons, the sons' parents' evening, and said that they just recently got diagnosed with being dyslexic, and said that because it sounds very similar and they can see a lot of similarities between me and them, that she says that I think that I needed basically to be tested for it. So I got diagnosed when I was about 7. I didn't really know what was kind of going off at that time. I mean, I was only 7, so I kind of knew something was going off, and yeah, trying to explain it, especially because it wasn't that known. I think my mum did a really good job explaining it to me. I used to get really frustrated, especially when I read. When I would read, it's kind of like, it was really strange. The words would kind of like move, and it's kind of like, now that, I mean, I can have glasses now, so they kind of help it a bit, and I did when I was older, when I was younger. When I was in secondary school, I did have tinted glasses, which helped as well. Sometimes the words can just kind of go all over the place, or I'd kind of like predict what I'd read before properly reading it, which means I didn't even read it properly, if that makes sense. So for example, if I saw mouse, I could read moose, something like that. So something that sounded and looks similar, but I could have like just read the first and the end and missed the middle, which means I predicted the wrong word. It sometimes got to a point as well where I'd actually read the same sentence twice, because it was kind of difficult to kind of like keep an eye on with the movement, that I'd read basically the same line twice. Because I was like pretty much the only child in school that had got diagnosed, I got a lot of one-on-one, and they used to take me out of class a lot and basically do a lot of one-on-one reading. And English I found really difficult. Maths, I absolutely love it. They usually say people that's got dyslexia aren't that good with maths because they kind of mix the numbers up. Me, I was really good. Dates, no. There's some dates I can remember, but I did mess numbers up just with dates. So I could mess like the year up or the months or something like that. It's like my mum's birthday. I know that now, but my mum's birthday is the 3rd of May. So it's like 0305, but sometimes it'd be like 0503. So, I mean, I know that now, but that's an example of what kind of I had to deal with when I was in school. So yeah, I kept getting taken out of class pretty much. I had one-on-one all the way through first school, and obviously up until year 4. That was when first school finished for me. I went into year 5 and 6, so I went to middle school for a year and then basically had a last year at primary school, which is a bit crazy. And by the time I got into year 5 and 6, it got to the point where I didn't have any more one-on-ones. It was more of a group thing. So they kind of had like a separate classroom where children would go if they're behind or if they need additional help. And it turned out that there were like 15, 20 people now in it getting the extra support, which was really good. And I was getting the extra support pretty much in every single class. So even though I really liked maths and I was quite good at it, I was at that point, I don't know if I was or not because I can't really remember, but I was getting additional support and needs in the class, pretty much all my classes. The time that I struggled most about being dyslexic was when I was at home, actually. At school, it wasn't so bad, especially when I was in like middle school and primary school, because there was a lot more people there. And it kind of made me feel a bit better, and it made my like anxiety a bit less than being one-on-one. But I got so much support being in school, but when I got home, that's when I kind of like was really hard on myself. Like, I can remember reading with my mum, and because I found reading most difficult, I used to basically just completely have a meltdown and kick off, because I used to say that I was stupid, I didn't know what I was doing, that I can't do things like this, and there's no point trying because I literally couldn't do it. But my mum explained it in a really nice way, saying that I was no different to anybody else. The only thing that was slightly different is my brain. She says my brain works slightly different to everybody else. So she says that I just need to work that little bit extra hard. I just need to work a little bit harder than everybody else around me to basically catch up. Now, when I got into year 7, which is secondary school, this is when it kind of went a little bit crazy. When I got into secondary school, all my records were lost, all of them. So year 7 up until I think it was year 9, all of them. So I went 2 to 3 years with nobody knowing that I was dyslexic. And because I'm a girl, girls can hide things a lot easier, and I think because I had so much support and help when I was younger, it made it easier as well, and I understood it a little bit better. And I kind of went around things, so I knew that I was really bad at spelling. So I had an electronic spell checker. The one that I actually had was a thesaurus and electronic spell checker. So I'd type in the word I think I wanted, it'd give me the word, but then I could also go through and get kind of like more words that mean the same thing. So it really helped me with like my English assignments and things, that if I needed a kind of like a bit more complicated words in there, that kind of just used to swap them over. But I was in second level on everything, which means number 1 is the highest, so it's like more difficult classes, and then stage 2 was when it was like still kind of like doing hard stuff, but it's not as difficult as the first one. So I was in like the second classes. So that means, I mean, obviously I did quite well to get in them, instead of being like 3 and 4, because obviously there's 4 in total. So I was quite chuffed to be in that. And then maths for me, like I said, I absolutely love maths and I thrived on it. It's logic, it's easy to understand, and I loved it. When I was actually in year 9, I got moved up into the first, it was either year 9 or 10, moved up to the first level. So I was in the highest set in maths. I was still second set in like science, English, and also my language, my languages, French. I got moved up to the top set in that as well, which I don't know how. But because I was in the top set of that, I also got to do 2 languages instead of 1. So it would kind of alternate every other week. So 1 week I'd do English, 1 week I'd do French, the week after that I'll do Spanish, then French, then Spanish, and it basically happened like that. It weren't until I was in top set in French, we had this teacher and she gave us this test, and she used to say, if I say in French, you write the word down what I said in English, and if I say it in English, you write the French word down. And basically I used to get really bad marks at that, and she used to have a go at me, and I used to say to her, how can you expect me to spell in French when I can barely spell in English? And then I told her I was dyslexic, and she was like, well, it's not on record, but I'm sorry, you're not having that. Because it used to get to the point where in the test, when she used to say, I just didn't do it anymore. I used to sit there just doodling pictures, because I just thought, what's the point in me even trying, because she's not listening and I'm not going to be able to do it. So that was quite difficult for me. And then it got to a point where my mum had to be called in to school. Well, basically I told my mum just demanded to see someone, because yeah. And yeah, she basically said that I'm dyslexic. I got diagnosed when I was 7, and they were like, well, I'm sorry, the records are lost and you need to be tested again. So I went through the whole diagnosis process again when I was in year 9, and funnily enough, I got diagnosed with being dyslexic again. But they said because I had so much support when I was younger that I didn't need to, and I had almost 3 years of not having support through the school, that I didn't have to have the support through school, basically like one-on-ones. So she basically asked me what could make my life a bit easier in class, and I was like, not reading out loud. I had a history teacher where he basically wouldn't read anything, and he'd ask people in the class to read out loud. And I used to hate it. Like I said, sometimes I'd read the same sentence twice, and I found it so humiliating, and I absolutely hated it. So, and to me, when I physically read something, it doesn't go in my mind. I can't process what I've said. So yeah, so I'm used to listening to things like audiobooks now. You've probably known audiobooks I listen to, I don't read, because I have to read them like 5 times for them to sink into my head. So yeah. So yeah, I just didn't want to read in class no more, and then I stopped it. Now and again I'd have to read, and I think that's only when he forgot that I didn't want to read ever. And he only made me read the tiniest bit if he did, because I think when I started reading he realised that I didn't want to read. So getting older and going to like the higher stages of like the last few years of secondary school, it did get a little bit more difficult, but I think if I went through secondary school again today, it'd be a lot worse. When I was at school and in secondary school, the way we did our GCSEs were we had like paperwork, we had assignments to do and coursework to do, and then your exam. And because I was dyslexic, I got like extra time on my exam. I got like, I think it was like an extra 25% or something like that on my exam. I can't remember for sure. And like I said, for me, when I got given something that I had to read, it takes me a lot to process it through my mind. And what I tend to do, which I can still do now, is when I start writing something, because there's so much going off in my brain, I'll like start writing one sentence and then finish it by writing another one, and you'd read the sentence and so many times I'd get, this doesn't make sense. Because and I do it now when I'm texting, I have to like proofread it before I send it, because I'll like start writing a sentence and then start writing a brand new sentence without finishing the other one, and I'll be like, I'll do it now when I write a sentence and miss the last word, full stop, and then do it, and they're like, well, I didn't know what I'm on about, I've missed the crucial word that needs to be in that sentence. So yes, I found exams very, very difficult, but they don't do that now. They don't do coursework and exams. And the thing is, I loved the coursework because I had to proofread it, edit it, proofread it, edit it, and because I kind of went into depth with it, I loved it. I got C's on most of mine, like level things, most of them, like maths, English. Well, I got B's in science, and I think I've got like B's in like technology and things. But the main ones like English and maths, I got C's. If I didn't do coursework, I would have got D's. On my tests, I got marked D. But what I used to do is I used to try and push my coursework as possibly like high as I could, where I'd get a B on my coursework. My exams would be a D, so I averaged at a C. And this is how I got my grades up, because there's no way if I didn't do coursework now that I'd have got like that level. Which is bad, because if you think now, dyslexia is more known, and yet I would have found it really, really difficult. I went on to do A-levels. I got quite ill during my A-levels, so I didn't really get to do that many. I picked up quite a few. I had like English literature, English language, I had psychology, drama, and I think that's it. But I did drop a couple. I dropped some because I was ill. I dropped English literature because I couldn't read on demand, because it takes me so long for it to sink in my head that I was like, I've read a book and I don't quite know what it was about. I couldn't really process it very well, so I dropped that because I just couldn't read. English language, I do really well at. I was really shocked actually. What I did is use my thesaurus, and when I used to write a piece of work, I used to go through like adjectives, so like all my describing words, and highlight them. I then go on my thesaurus, like say if I put big, I used to highlight all the words that was kind of like big, huge, like humongous, that type of thing. And because they weren't that complicated and they were easy words, because English literature is about using all the complicated words that I didn't really understand what was the point, just using normal regular words. But I went through my thesaurus and basically typed in big, got all of this list of other words that mean big, and just kind of like scribbled it out, wrote one of those words. And then I got A's. Don't know how that happened, but like I said, I was poorly through majority of my first year in sixth form, so I didn't get that good grades because I was only probably there for the first good few weeks, and then the last few months of it, I was in and out of hospital and I was very ill, so I didn't get to finish that. I didn't get to finish my A-levels, and I went on to college instead because I wanted something that was easy for me. But as I grown up, it can affect me in some ways, and in some ways it didn't. I can still go through life of people knowing that I'm not dyslexic. Seeing through jobs. I had a job where I did a lot of paperwork and a lot of numbers, and obviously I love maths, so that was fine. And yeah, it weren't that bad. There was sometimes that used to drive me insane. For example, like when you used to get these codes when I was younger, like Sims for example, you'd get like a code at the back of your disc, back of you, like your disc case, and you'd have to like type that in to say it's official. And there was other things that you get it with, and I used to sit there and I can remember with my mum reading it out and she went, that's not right. And then I did it again, she went, but that was the other way around last time. And I was like, I'm dyslexic, you can't make me get it right every single time. Yes, I'm gonna mix some things up. That's me. That's a part of being dyslexic. So yeah, I went through majority of like my young adulthood, 16 to like 18, 19, with pretty much no like difficulties that much. Now that I'm kind of like a full grown adult, there was certain things that I did find difficult. Getting back into education. When I not long had Drew, I was 21, I decided, because I always wanted to be a teacher, I decided to get my teaching degree, but I wanted to be a teaching assistant. So I went to do that, and I was put in a class with year 1 children, year 1s. And I found that difficult when it came to spelling. They'd come up to me and say, how do you spell this word? And I had to say to them, just sound it out and spell it how it sounds. And I was like, and I can remember once I was sat on the carpet reading a book with them, and I just found it so difficult to read the book. It's a children's book and I found it difficult, which I could read it completely fine, but then there would be some words in there that I was like, yeah, I can't read that. And because you kind of have to read it upside down when you're speaking, you have to go like this, so see if you're reading it down or reading it like this. It's not like reading a normal book, and I find that really, really hard, especially because you couldn't track the lines properly because you had to show everybody the pictures. So yes, that kind of like hit me like a brick basically, and I struggled with it. Because I suffer from anxiety, I get slightly uncomfortable with younger children. I mean, I don't really much anymore. Like they need the toilet and stuff. I worked with like foundation ages and nursery school ages, and I found it really difficult for like taking them to the toilet and stuff. I found it awkward. But then when I was in year 1, because I was going to get a teaching assistant like degree from like ages 5+, I think it is. So all the way up to like secondary school and like college. Yeah, I sat there and I was like, if I'm struggling with year 1, what it's going to be like if I go to year 6 class. I don't get to choose what class I teach in when I get my degree. I just get put into a class with anyone, and that kind of like was very, very difficult. And I kind of like had to try and accept either I was going to get embarrassed, more than likely be one of those teachers that kind of got picked on for it, or just don't do it. And a lot of things kind of piled up with it, and financially it got difficult because then when I got onto the big course, you had to do a booster course and then go into a big course. The booster course I didn't have to pay for, but because I already got my degree in drama, I then had to pay for this degree in teaching assistants, and it was like £1,000, and I only just had a baby. And I needed to go back to work. So juggling working 18 hours, doing 1 night at college plus 16 hours in a school setting, having a husband that worked full time, and a baby that was 8 months old, there was just too much going off. I could only have like 4 days availability, which is my husband's 2 days off, my mum's 2 days off, and then 4 days would be probably me working, and then I couldn't have I think it's 12 hours in the school. I just couldn't physically do it. Especially because I work 9 till 5, it's just, I was usually within them times. I worked at the weekends, mainly. It just, yeah, it got very difficult. So when I was younger, it was easy enough to hide, but as I got older, I think I kind of worried and panicked a lot more. So I didn't get my qualification in teaching assistants, and now that I looked back, I was like, right, then let's get it in younger children. I have 2 young kids. Why should I be embarrassed by taking them to the toilet, like other children to the toilet and stuff anymore, when I've done it with my 2? tried to look into getting the early years diploma and they don't do it anymore. So I'm gonna have to look into that. But yeah, so the only times that I really struggled with it was probably the first few years of school, like when I was in like middle school or first school. And then as a grown up, I can still hide the fact certain things, but I know kind of what to do now to kind of like cover the fact that I'm dyslexic. So kind of like hide certain things and like the way I'm writing and whatnot, it still doesn't come across that smart. And there's certain other things that I used to get laughed at as well, which is part of being dyslexic, but I didn't know it was. When I tried to remember certain things, like certain words, I'd either recognise that word that went with something else or that completely backwards. Like hiccups. When I was younger, I couldn't remember what hiccups were, so I called them uckers. So it's kind of like mixing the letters up a little bit. And it's the same with certain things. I used to get laughed at when I was in secondary school and I absolutely hated it. I just kind of like stopped speaking stuff when I got to that age because I was just fed up with getting laughed at. But it was kind of like where I tried to say a particular word. Like I can remember when I was younger, someone said something quite racist. Me meaning to say racist, that sounded racist, you can't say that. I basically says to him, you can't say that makes you a rapist. Two words that sounded very similar but are completely different, that's what would happen. I'd get them mixed up. So as I've grown up, I've kind of learned to laugh at myself a little bit or just express, I know it sounds like this, but I know that's not the word. So for example, for me, learning and understanding the word Divergent from the video, from the film, I love Divergent. I used to remember detergent. So it got to a point now, for example, my sister-in-law knows and understands. So obviously she won't laugh at me. I would say to her, right, that film, I can't remember what it's called, but I know it sounds like detergent. I used to go from there. And then after a bit, I kind of said, right, I remember detergent is Divergent. It just kind of, that's kind of like a way that I started remembering things. And I'm going to go back to certain experiences when I was in secondary school as well, but I had a great kind of like upbringing with being dyslexic. I know a lot of parents, especially nowadays, when they're going through the kind of like diagnosis thing and being told that the children could possibly be dyslexic, they think it's a bad thing, and it's just not. It's just the way that they learn, they've just got to change it around a bit so that child learns in a different way to everybody else. It doesn't mean that they're going to have a really bad life. I've not got a really bad life. But I mean, it may be a bit of a shock, but a lot of children when I was younger used it as an excuse. And a lot of my friends used to say it to me as an excuse. So yeah, which I absolutely hated looking back now, that they say, oh, she's dyslexic, she can't do it. And I'm like, but I can. I used to find it really frustrating, but I never used to say anything then. But when I was in year 10, we started something called peer mentoring, where we kind of like got training of like, kind of like a therapist, a counsellor. We got that type of training of the way to talk to children, the way that the brain works, and the way that we can help other people by listening and obviously replying back and not having our own, like always our own opinion in it. So when I was in the last few years of secondary school, I would go around and help the younger children. I'd go around in year 7 and 8 classes and help them with things. And I got it so many times where I'd go into a year 7 class and they'll turn around to me and say, I can't do it, I'm dyslexic. And I turn around to them and say, you can do it, I'm dyslexic, and I did. And I don't know, with that thing, going through all that when I was at school, that's what made me want to be a teacher. Because I looked back and I thought, I don't want people with learning disabilities think that they can't do it. When they can, they just might have to do it a different way to everybody else. And it kind of frustrated me, but I knew it weren't necessarily their fault. I know sometimes some people were using it as an excuse because they just didn't want to do it. But I also know that some people being diagnosed didn't get the greatest explanation that they should have done when they was younger. I know a lot of parents that may not understand it might kind of like not explain it in the correct way. I mean, my mum explained it in the best way that I understood. Like, I can do everything I want to, it just means I have to work a little bit harder than everybody else. And that's what I did. I made sure that I worked and I didn't slack off. And it did get frustrating at some point, because when we was a kid, pod was the word. And for like, if you'd either seem clever or you do your work, you was pod. And that was me, obviously. And I can remember being in my highest set of maths, so my set 1, and we got given our test results, and then someone next to me got higher, and she looked at my results and she went, "How have I got a higher result than you? You're a pod, you do work, you're really clever." And I went, "No." She says, "I do my work to catch up with everybody else around me." I said, "Doing my work doesn't mean I'm clever, I'm doing my work to basically be on the same level as everybody else." And I think that's when people kind of like realised that I had to do my work, because if I didn't do my work, then I would pretty much fail. And some people, I think, don't think of it in that way of, I can do it, I just have to work a bit harder. They might be like, I can't do it, so why even try? So it's just kind of like having the frame of mind, that knowing that there's nothing wrong with being dyslexic. You just have to try a little bit harder than everybody else to catch up. But it is possible to be like that. It is possible to live a life where people don't know you're dyslexic, which, like me, but it has affected me in some ways, because like I said, I want to be a teacher, but I just got very like, I lost my confidence with it basically. And I think because I do suffer from anxiety, being laughed at by a school because I can't spell a word, I'd find really, really difficult. And now my son's in year 2, and now I like the fact that he can correct me on my spelling, which is great. But he knows, I've told him, and that's what I want to be open about. I want to tell him, yeah, I struggle with spelling, and if you see that I'm spelling something wrong, just correct me. I'm happy with that. So yeah, I know that my son is definitely not dyslexic. My daughter is only 3, so we'll have to see about what the future brings. But yeah, it's as an adult, and it is okay. I've not struggled with things like day-to-day living. I've not struggled with them, because I think I pushed myself so much when I was younger that I've got to a comfortable place now. I mean, like I said, I would love to be a teacher, and yes, I'd love to be a teacher with special needs as well, but that is where my anxiety kicks in. I struggle to kind of like cope and understand people that have special needs that aren't always being dyslexic. I just find it really uncomfortable, and it's really like, I feel really bad saying that, but certain situations and being with certain people with needs just make me feel uncomfortable, because I've got bad hearing as well. So for someone that can't speak so well and clearly, I can't always understand what they say. It's not like necessarily because they speak a bit differently, it's because I can't always hear stuff. Soft sounds, I have trouble hearing. And yeah, it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable, which I wish it didn't, and I wish my anxiety wasn't there. And to be honest, if I didn't have any anxiety and just be dyslexic, I probably could have got a lot further. But unfortunately, I've always suffered from anxiety, and yeah, so that probably caused more havoc in my life than being dyslexic. But yeah, if you're going through a diagnosis, either as a grown-up or as a grown-up your child's going through the diagnosis or has recently been diagnosed, don't show them that it's something that can stop them, because nothing can. And my mum kind of drilled it into my mind that I can do whatever I want. It just means if I want to get something, I just have to work that bit harder to achieve that. And like I said, I went from moving up to first levels in certain subjects that I never thought I would, and I did. So it's about kind of like helping your child. I think it's more mentally that it can affect you when you know something's wrong and you know you struggle with something, compared, because that's the thing, when you get older you start comparing yourself to others. So like I probably realised that people around me was reading a lot better and didn't get things wrong as much as me, and then that's when it started, like I started kicking myself for it and I was really hard on myself. So that's when you kind of like have to step in as a parent and be like, no, you're not stupid, you're not this, that and the other, you can do anything you want, we just have to work at it, and then obviously do a little bit more work at it and harder than everybody else, and then you can achieve it. So yeah, I didn't let it stop me when I was younger. Yes, I did let it stop me a little bit as I got older, but like I said, that's probably my anxiety that kind of kicked in there as well. Don't worry at all. Don't let it be something that's different. If you're dyslexic or your child is dyslexic, it doesn't matter. They're still your child, they don't change. And just show them that having that, it doesn't change who they are. It doesn't change the way that you feel about them or anybody else feel about them. It just means that they do need to work just a tiny bit harder than everybody else just to catch up. And that's how I always thought. And like I said, because I got so much support when I was in first school and primary school, when I got to secondary, it wasn't so bad. I hid it for 3 years. So yeah, only when it got to me doing French spelling that I needed help. And obviously that makes sense now. So yeah, don't be ashamed, don't let it knock you down, because it's not going to change anything. If any of you've got any questions or want to share any experiences, please pop them down below. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can and share my experience with you. If I haven't spoke about anything in this video, I can share some other things with you that I remember in future. So yes, please pop a comment down below if there's anything you want to ask me, and I'll be happy to help. But if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and yes, I hope you have an amazing rest of the day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!